Tell us what's going on in Pittsburgh.
So big news in the world of driverless cars. Uber has embarked on this crazy research project that everybody thought would take decades, and they're trying to launch it right now, which is very exciting and in some ways leaps them ahead of Google and Tesla, even though Google is still kind of seen as the leader in terms of technology.
So no offense to our friends in Pennsylvania, but why Pittsburgh?
So Pittsburgh, most people don't know this, Carnegie Mellon University is like the place to do autonomous driving, driverless cars. And basically, at the end of 2014, Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, hired a huge chunk of the the Carnegie Mellon robotics department, and they've built up this team that now has hundreds of people, and they're actually going beyond Pittsburgh now. They're opening offices in Palo Alto and San Francisco as well.
How did they get there so fast? Was it Ford who was saying, or Google was saying this is years and years away?
Well, and I think it still is. So it's important to know that the cars in Pittsburgh will have safety drivers and actually co-pilots. I rode in one of these, and it's kind of an interesting experience. There's someone taking notes while you're driving around. That said, it's ambitious. I mean, they are on the street. There are pedestrians, bikes, everything that you could think of. One thing they've done that's interesting and very aggressive is they just bought a company, and that's another thing we're reporting also exclusively, Otto, which is a driverless trucking company. It sounds kind of weird, but it actually may be the biggest deal that's happened in the space yet. We think it was about $680 million, and there still are incentives, so it could get bigger.
So how big is this? How many cars are there going to be in Pittsburgh by the end of this month?
Well, by the end of this month, I'm not sure. I think right now it's not that many. They're saying 100 Volvo XC90s, which is like the Volvo SUV, by the end of the year. Uber also has a deal that they just announced right now with Volvo to develop a driverless car. So they're going to spend $300 million on that. So basically they're just pouring resources into this project.
What kind of regulation might have come out of Pittsburgh? I mean, I can't imagine that the local government's going to be like, great, good luck, no problem.
So as far as regulators are concerned, these driverless cars are just like regular cars,
really? Because
the safety driver is sitting there kind of with his hands or her hands just sort of on the wheel, ready to seize control at any time. There are actually, I don't believe, any specific regulations to driverless cars in Pittsburgh, but basically the DMV just treats the safety driver as a driver. And I think obviously that's going to be something that needs to be worked on and regulators will need to figure out. The thing is, the technology isn't there yet. I mean, when I did my ride, there were a handful of times where basically the car will kick out to the driver. The car will say, I don't know what to do here. The driver needs to take over, usually for a couple of seconds. And that's why these trained safety drivers are there, because they're just ready to do it. And in cases with, there was a Tesla accident,
yes.
a few months ago.
In Florida.
Right.
Fatal.
And where basically, Tesla tells you to keep your hands on the wheel, and it seems like maybe the driver didn't. Or in any case, the driver and the computer both made mistakes.
Apart from the regulators, which is a great question, what about insurance companies? Do they like this idea or not like this idea?
I think obviously it creates questions, but I think broadly it's going to reduce the number of accidents. So I think you'd imagine insurers were like that. On the other hand, if you game it out in a very long-term way, maybe there would be so many fewer accidents that it would drastically change the insurance business. So I think there are a lot of questions there. We don't really know the answers yet.
And what does this do to the competitors, like a Lyft or other Uber competitors out there?
So I think Uber has now jumped ahead of everybody in the ride-sharing space with this. Lyft has a deal with GM. They're going in that direction. Google has indicated that they want to do this, but obviously it's still early days. The question is, how much money is this going to cost? And Uber is still scrambling towards profitability. They're involved. They've made huge investments in India. They just made a deal in China, so they don't have to keep losing money there. So I think that's the question: is how can the driverless car thing happen quickly enough that it'll really help Uber's business?
And from your reporting, does Uber see this mainly as an urban phenomenon, where you're going to be replacing taxi cabs, or do they see it more broadly?
I mean, over the course of decades, I think they see it broadly. I think they think that the cost of taking an Uber will be cheaper than, say, the per-mile reimbursement that the IRS gives you. So, I mean, literally cheaper than owning a car. I think in the short term, it's going to be in cities and also in the U.S., where labor is a lot more expensive. Because in China, where drivers are a lot cheaper, it's not clear that the numbers work quite as well.